Hi there, I'm Michelle and welcome back to the Canadian History of Chronology channel. Today's episode, number 5, is about the group of First Nations people generally referred to as the peoples of the Pacific Northwest. These people lived in the lush rainforest, fjords, and islands of Canada's west coast. While the people of the plains and others lived subsistence lifestyles, the Pacific Northwest peoples actually lived rich and complex lives supported by abundant food and a mild climate. At the time of first contact, the Pacific Northwest was the most densely populated region in what would become Canada, with almost half of all native populations living in the region of British Columbia. Interestingly, more than 30 languages were spoken in this region, with 2 of them, Haida and Tlingit, being isolates. An isolate is a unique language, unrelated to any other. Now that's remarkable because most languages derive from other languages. Of the many groups within this region, some of the more well-known are the Haida of the Queen Charlotte Islands, the Tlingit of the Alaskan Panhandle, the Coast Salish of the Vancouver region, and the Nootka of the west coast of Vancouver Island. Now, of particular cultural interest are the totem pole, the concept of ownership, social classes, and the potlatch ceremony. Totem poles were feared at first by the early Europeans who thought they represented pagan gods or demons. Actually, the poles represent the symbols and stories of a specific clan. They're more like a family's coat of arms or family crest. The totem poles were also signs of wealth, and the number of poles and their size often showed social status. Also of cultural interest that was different from most other First Nations cultures is the concept of private ownership. It was central and explicit among the coastal societies. White traders in the late 1700s were quite surprised to find out that all lands belonged to someone. Even fishing, hunting, logging, and the right to water required payment of some kind to someone. And again, unlike other First Nation cultures, the peoples of the Pacific Northwest had an elaborate social structure. They had a caste system made up of several distinct and formal social classes. At the top were the nobles. This was the group from which chiefs were selected from. Next came the commoners, and below them, the slaves. The slaves were generally people captured from neighboring nations. And the Nootka peoples of Vancouver Island even had a special class for the whale hunters. They lived apart prior to the hunt and engaged in elaborate rituals. These societies were even able to have subclasses of professional artists who apprenticed under masters and studied their crafts for years. The art of the peoples of the Pacific Northwest is unparalleled. It's often considered to be one of the richest artistic traditions in the world. Now, the raising of a totem pole, selecting a new chief, or the marriage of a noble was often celebrated by a potlatch. The word potlatch can be loosely translated as to give, which is the opposite of what the Europeans or other First Nations cultures did at such occasions. At a potlatch, gifts were given by the host to the guests. Yes, given, not received. Gifts such as artwork, food, slaves, blankets, and even land titles, allowing the recipient the right to hunt or fish on the host's lands for a specific period of time. Sometimes guests received so many gifts that they had to be provided with extra canoes to bring them all home. The concept of potlatch is so different from that of the Europeans. The peoples of the Pacific Northwest saw wealth not as something to collect and hoard, but as the amount one is capable of giving away. And this worked both ways. A potlatch given had to be returned, and a potlatch return was often given with interest because as a matter of honor, it had to be larger and richer. Unfortunately, the trade with the Europeans changed all of this. The Europeans brought things like sewing machines, jewelry, and clocks. Trade in such goods resulted in riches being less distributed, so potlatch gifts couldn't always be repaid in kind. This social debt led to social shame, and tensions rose among the peoples. If this wasn't enough, missionaries insisted that the potlatch was an obstacle to Christianization, and by the late 1800s, the government of Canada outlawed the potlatch ceremony. The Europeans saw this gift-giving as a blatant disregard of the collection of material wealth, so the potlatch became a crime. In 1927, this law was strengthened by making potlatches punishable by 6 months in prison. Sadly, potlatches remained illegal in Canada until 1951. Well, that's about it for my condensed history of the peoples of the Pacific Northwest. And remember, at any time, feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I'll do my best to respond to them all. And please, be a true Canadian and be polite. And stay tuned for episode 6, The People of the Plateau. And if you like this content, please subscribe to my channel and give it a thumbs up. And hit the bell if you'd like to be notified of any new content. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.